You're in the shower, nobody's talking to you, nothing is happening, and yet there's an entire conversation playing out in your head. You're saying exactly the right thing, you're finally standing up for yourself, or maybe you're somewhere else entirely, a version of your life that doesn't exist yet. And it feels so real, so good, so alive that when you snap back to the actual moment, the bathroom feels smaller than it did before. You've done this your whole life, and you've never told anyone. Let me paint you a picture. There's a person, let's call her Maya. Maya is, by every external measure, a completely normal human being. She has a job, she has friends. She laughs at the right moments and says, "I'm fine," with convincing regularity. But Maya has a secret life. It happens when she's washing dishes, when she's on the train, when she's lying in bed at 1 a.m. staring at the ceiling. Maya goes somewhere else. She replays conversations that never happened. She imagines reunions that will never come. She builds entire futures, marriages, confrontations, apologies, victories with a level of detail that would impress a novelist. Sometimes it's beautiful. She's loved in these fantasies. She's understood. She's finally the version of herself she's always wanted to be. But then she opens her eyes, and reality rushes back in like cold water. And she feels something strange, not just disappointment, but almost grief. Like she lost something that was never really there. And she wonders quietly, in a way she's never said out loud, "What is wrong with me?" Nothing is wrong with you, but something very specific is happening. And once you understand what it is, you will never see your own mind the same way again. Here's what nobody tells you about the human brain. Your brain cannot fully tell the difference between something that is happening and something that you vividly imagine happening. Read that again, let it land. When you picture a scenario in your mind, when you feel the nervousness, the triumph, the heartbreak of something that exists only in your imagination, your nervous system responds to it like it's real. Your heart rate shifts, your emotions move, you feel things, actual chemical embodied things. This is not a flaw. This is, in fact, one of the most sophisticated things your brain can do. It's called mental simulation. And it's the same ability that lets architects design buildings before they're built, that lets athletes mentally rehearse a performance, that lets humans plan for the future at all. The problem is not the ability. The problem is what we start using it for, because at some point, usually without noticing, the mental simulation stops being a tool, and it starts being a refuge. Think about the first time you really retreated into your imagination. You were probably young. Something felt too hard, too painful, too out of your control, and your mind did what brilliant minds do. It found an exit. It gave you a world where things went differently, where you were heard, where you were chosen, where you won, and it felt like relief, so you went back. Of course you did, why wouldn't you? Relief is one of the most powerful rewards a human brain can experience. Every time you return to that inner world, your brain quietly noted, "This works, this helps, this is safe," and it started building you a habit, not a bad habit, not yet, just a pattern. A groove in the road your mind learned to drive down automatically whenever the outside world got too heavy. The question is, what are you escaping from? Here's where it gets interesting. And I need you to stay with me here, because this is the part that changes things. Most people assume that daydreaming and fantasy thinking are about wanting something you don't have. You imagine a perfect relationship because you're lonely. You replay old arguments because you want to win. You picture a different life because yours feels disappointing. And yes, sometimes that's true, but for a lot of people, maybe for you, it goes deeper than desire. It goes all the way down to something that's much harder to name. It's about feeling. Specifically about feeling things you haven't been given permission to feel anywhere else. Think about it. In your real life, how often do you get to fully feel something? How often do you get to be furious or devastated or wildly, unguardedly in love without immediately censoring yourself? Without someone minimizing it, or without the voice in your own head saying, "Calm down, stop being dramatic, this doesn't matter." But in your imagination, nobody tells you to calm down. Nobody judges the size of your feelings. Nobody leaves. Your inner world might be the only place where you feel completely free. And that is not escapism. That is a coping mechanism. A beautifully constructed, deeply human response to a world that very often doesn't give us enough space to feel. But here's the part we need to sit with. Coping mechanisms are not cures, they're bridges. And if you stay on the bridge long enough, you stop looking for the other side. There's a specific kind of person who knows this from the inside. They're not fantasy prone because life is terrible. Sometimes their life is genuinely okay, but they've spent so many years perfecting the inner world that the outer world started feeling thin by comparison. Shallow, low resolution. Real conversations feel clunky next to the ones they rehearsed. Real relationships feel complicated next to the ones they imagined. Real success feels anticlimactic compared to the version that lived in their head. And so a quiet trade happens. Bit by bit, investment shifts from the life that is to the life that isn't. This is the part that hurts, not because the imagination is dangerous, but because it starts costing you the very thing it promised to give you: connection, feeling, aliveness. You go looking for life in your head, and slowly, without meaning to, you become less present in the life you actually have. Pause for a second, not to feel bad about yourself, just to feel the truth of what I just said, because there's a good chance that something in you just recognized it. and recognition is where everything begins. There's a name in psychology for the more intense version of this. It's called maladaptive daydreaming, and researchers who study it describe it almost like an addiction. The person knows they're doing it. They sometimes want to stop, but the pull is too strong, the relief too immediate, the inner world too rich. One study found that people who engage in this pattern often describe their daydreams not as idle thoughts, but as immersive, emotionally vivid, almost narrative experiences. Some even have recurring characters, ongoing storylines, full inner worlds they return to again and again over years. Does that sound familiar? Here's what that research also found. Almost universally, these individuals are not mentally unwell. They are highly sensitive, highly creative. They feel things deeply and process experiences intensely. And somewhere along the way, the world didn't quite have the bandwidth for all of that, so they built their own. You didn't retreat into your imagination because something was broken. You retreated because something was full and it had nowhere else to go. Now here's the twist, the thing I don't think you've been told, the imagining. It's not actually the problem. The problem is the gap it's covering. The belief underneath it that the real world, this actual, physical, imperfect, uncomfortable life, cannot hold what you are, cannot contain what you feel, cannot give you what you need. And that belief is wrong, but it doesn't feel wrong. It feels like evidence, years and years of evidence. So what do you do with that? You start small, not with grand gestures, not with forcing yourself to stop daydreaming or shaming yourself for every mental detour. You start by getting curious about the gap. Next time you drift, and you will drift because that's what beautifully wired minds do, don't immediately follow the storyline, just pause, just for a breath, and ask, what was I feeling right before I left? Boredom, loneliness, a low hum of anxiety, a situation that felt unresolved. Because that feeling, the one you were trying to outrun, that's the one that deserves your attention. Not a lecture, not a solution, just your attention. The same richness you've been pouring into imaginary worlds. It belongs in this one, in the actual conversations you're afraid to have. In the relationships you've kept at arm's length because real people are messier than the ones in your head. In the moments you've been present for only halfway because half of you was somewhere else. You are not too much for this world. You were just never taught how to bring all of yourself into it. The imagined versions of your life, the arguments you won, the love you felt, the person you became in 100 different scenarios, those weren't delusions. They were blueprints. They were your inner self quietly, insistently showing you what it needs. The only question is whether you're willing to start building it. Not in your head, here, in this life, in this body. In this imperfect, complicated, real, and irreplaceable existence that is, whether you believe it right now or not, more than enough to hold everything you are. You don't have to stop imagining. You just have to stop making the imagination a replacement. Let it be a beginning instead.